It was 2013, and Greenhaven, Ohio, wasn't the kind of place you'd call welcoming. A small town where everyone knew your business, where whispers about that kind of boy could ruin you faster than a bad harvest. I was Jamie Carter, the quiet kid who kept his head down, sketching in the margins of his notebooks, dreaming of a life beyond the cornfields. I wasn't out not to my parents, not to my friends, not even to myself in the mirror. But I knew. I'd always known. Ethan Caldwell was the opposite. He rolled into Greenhaven like a storm, all brash confidence and sharp smiles. He was 17, a senior who'd transferred from some city I couldn't pronounce, with a leather jacket and a laugh that made your heart stutter. He didn't hide who he was. He'd hold hands with boys in the school parking lot, kiss them under the bleachers, and dare anyone to say a word. Most didn't. Not because they accepted him, but because Ethan had a way of making you feel small if you tried to challenge him. I met him officially on a Friday night in October. My dad, a volunteer EMT, had picked him up after a fight outside the local diner. Ethan had taken a beating 3 guys from the football team, didn't take kindly to his kind, but he'd given as good as he got. I was in the passenger seat, sketching the moon over the dashboard, when Dad pulled over and hauled Ethan into the truck bed. "Stay put, kid," Dad growled, but Ethan just grinned, blood trickling down his chin. "You got a pen?" He asked me through the open back window, his voice rough but steady. I handed him my pencil without thinking, and he started doodling on his own arm, like the pain didn't matter. "What's your name, quiet guy?" "Jamie," I mumbled, my face hot. I didn't look at him, but I could feel his eyes on me, like he was peeling back layers I'd spent years building. That night, he followed me out of the truck when we dropped him off at his foster home. "You're different," he said, leaning against the gate, his bruised face catching the porch light. "You don't belong here, Jamie." "Neither do I." I didn't know then that different would become my undoing, or that Ethan's version of saving me would feel a lot like drowning. The next few weeks were a blur. Ethan was relentless. He'd find me at school, sit next to me in the cafeteria, and talk like we'd been friends forever. He told stories of the city, of clubs where people danced without fear, of a world where you could love who you wanted and not lose everything. I listened, hungry for it, but terrified. My parents were church-going folks, the kind who didn't talk about those things. If they knew what I was, what I felt, I'd be out on the street or worse. Ethan didn't care about the rules. He'd drag me to the edge of town, to abandoned barns or the rusted playground by the creek, and we'd talk for hours. He'd tell me about his mom, who'd kicked him out when he came out at 15, and his dad, who he hadn't seen since he was a kid. "You don't have to be like them," he'd say, his hand brushing mine. "You can be free." One night, under a sky heavy with stars, he kissed me. It was quick, fierce, like he was daring the universe to stop him. I froze, my heart hammering so loud I thought it'd wake the whole town. "You're shaking," he whispered, his lips still closed. "Don't be scared, Jamie. This is who you are." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be brave like him. But I wasn't. Not yet. By spring, we were inseparable. Ethan was my secret, my rebellion, my everything. We'd sneak out to the quarry, swim in the cold water, and lie on the rocks, our fingers tangled. He'd talk about leaving Greenhaven, about moving to New York or San Francisco, where we could be together without hiding. "You and me, Jamie," he'd say. "We'll make it." But Greenhaven wasn't done with us. The whispers grew louder. Kids at school started looking at me differently, their eyes narrowing when Ethan slung an arm around my shoulders. My dad started asking questions why I was out so late, why I was hanging around that boy. I lied, over and over. until the lies felt heavier than the truth. Then came the night that changed everything. It was June, the air thick with humidity, and Ethan had convinced me to go to a party at the edge of town. It was a bad idea, I knew it the second we walked in. The room was packed with kids from school, most of them drunk, their laughter sharp and cruel. Someone shoved Ethan, called him a name I won't repeat. He laughed it off, but I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. It happened fast. A punch was thrown. Then another. I tried to pull Ethan back, but he was already swinging, his fists a blur. The crowd closed in, and I was caught in the middle, my arm twisted behind me as someone pinned me down. I heard Ethan shouting my name, saw blood on his face again, and then the world went dark. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Ethan was gone, and my dad was standing over me, his face a mask of fury and shame. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. My arm was in a sling. My ribs ached with every breath, and my dad's silence was louder than any sermon he'd ever preached. He didn't look at me, just stared at the wall, his hands clenched into fists. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, like he was afraid the words would break something. "You're not to see that boy again. Jamie. You hear me?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Ethan was gone, vanished into the night after the fight, and no one would tell me where he was. The nurses whispered about that troublemaker, and the cops who came to take my statement barely looked at me. I was a kid caught in the crossfire of a town that didn't forgive people like us. When I got home, my mom wouldn't meet my eyes. She busied herself with dishes, her hands trembling as she scrubbed plates that were already clean. My dad sat me down and laid out the rules. No more late nights. No more sneaking out. No more Ethan. "You're better than this," he said, but what he meant was, "You're not one of them." I wanted to scream that I was, that I loved Ethan, that I wasn't ashamed. But the words stayed lodged in my throat, choking me. Weeks passed, and Greenhaven closed ranks. Ethan's foster parents said he'd been sent to another town, maybe another state. No one knew for sure if they did. They weren't telling me. I called the number he'd given me, but it was disconnected. I checked the quarry, the playground, every place we'd ever gone together, but it was like he'd never existed. I was alone, carrying a secret that felt like a bruise that wouldn't heal. School was worse. The kids who'd been at the party spread the story, twisted it until I was the one who'd started the fight, the one who'd corrupted Ethan. I stopped sketching, stopped talking, stopped feeling. My parents sent me to church counseling, where a pastor with kind eyes and a cruel tongue told me I could be fixed if I tried hard enough. I nodded, lied, and hated myself for it. By senior year, I was a ghost in my own life. I graduated, got a job at the local hardware store, and saved every penny for a bus ticket out of Greenhaven. I didn't know where I'd go, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not where every street corner reminded me of Ethan, of the boy who'd made me feel alive and then left me to drown. I was 19 when I finally left. I took a Greyhound to Chicago, a city big enough to swallow me whole. I found a cheap apartment, a job at a coffee shop, and a community center where people like me didn't have to hide. For the first time, I said the words out loud. "I'm gay." The guy running the group, a soft-spoken man named Marcus, hugged me when I started crying. "You're home now," he said, and I believed him. Chicago was freedom, but it was also lonely. I dated, but no one stuck. Every guy I met, I compared to Ethan, his laugh, his recklessness, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I hated him for leaving, but I missed him more than I could stand. I started sketching again, filling notebooks with his face, his hands, the curve of his smile. It was my way of keeping him close, even if he was gone. Then, 5 years after that night at the party, I saw him. It was a rainy Tuesday, and I was wiping down tables at the coffee shop when the door chimed. I looked up, and there he was, Ethan. Older but unmistakable. His blonde hair shorter. His leather jacket replaced by a tailored coat. He was with a group of guys, laughing, his voice carrying over the hum of the espresso machine. My heart stopped, then started again, too fast. He didn't see me at first. I watched him order, his movements smooth, confident, like he'd never been broken. When he finally looked my way, his eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought he'd run. But he didn't. He walked over, his smile cautious but warm. "Jamie Carter," he said, like it was a prayer. "Holy shit, it's you." We talked for hours that night, after my shift ended. He told me he'd been sent to a group home after the fight, then bounced around until he aged out of the system. He'd landed in Chicago, gone to college, and was working as a graphic designer. He was out, proud, living the life he'd always talked about. "I thought about you every day," he said, his hand brushing mine. "I wanted to find you, but I didn't know how. I wanted to be angry, to scream at him for leaving me, for letting me carry the weight of that night alone. But when he looked at me, his eyes soft and searching, I couldn't. Instead, I let him kiss me, right there in the empty coffee shop, and it felt like coming home. That night, we fell back into each other's lives like no time had passed. Ethan was different now, steadier, less reckless, but he was still the boy who dared me to be brave. We dated, moved in together, built a life in Chicago's vibrant queer community. He was my first love, my only love, and when he proposed 2 years later, I said yes without hesitation. But there was a shadow between us, one I couldn't name. Ethan talked about our past like it was a grand adventure, like he'd pulled me out of Greenhaven's clutches and set me free. "I saved you, didn't I?" he'd say, half joking, his arm around me. I'd smile, but inside, I was screaming. He didn't know what it cost me family, my home, my sense of self. He didn't know that sometimes, when I looked at him, I saw the boy who'd ruined me as much as he'd loved me. Our wedding was small, just a handful of friends in a Chicago park, the skyline glittering behind us. Ethan looked perfect in his navy suit, his smile brighter than the summer sun. I wore a simple white shirt, my hands shaking as I said my vows. "I promise to love you, to fight for you, to be your home," I said, meaning every word. But as I slipped the ring on his finger, I felt it again, that shadow, heavy and unspoken, whispering that love wasn't always enough. We were 26, and life was good. Ethan's design career was taking off, and I'd started teaching art at a community center, pouring my heart into helping kids like me find their voice. We had an apartment with a view of Lake Michigan, a dog named Jasper, and a circle of friends who felt like family. But the past was never far away. Every time Ethan told our story, how we'd escaped Greenhaven, how he'd saved, May, felt a crack widen in my chest. He didn't mean to hurt me. I knew that. Ethan was proud of us, of what we built despite the odds. But he didn't see the scars I carried, the ones that ached when I thought of my parents' silence, of the years I'd spent rebuilding myself. He didn't know that sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I wondered if I'd married him out of love or out of a need to prove I could survive him. One night, a year into our marriage, the truth started to spill. We were at a friend's dinner party, wine glasses clinking, laughter filling the room. Someone asked how we met, and Ethan launched into his version of the story, the rebellious kid from the city, the quiet boy from the sticks, the love that conquered all. Our friends ate it up, their eyes shining with admiration. I smiled, but my grip on my glass tightened. Later, in the cab home, I couldn't hold it in. "You always make it sound so easy," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "Like you just swooped in and fixed everything." Ethan frowned, his hand pausing on my knee. What are you talking about? We got out. Jamie. We're here. Together. Isn't that what matters? You don't get it, I said, my throat tight. You left me. After that night, you were gone, and I was the one who paid for it. My dad barely spoke to me. The whole town turned on me. I lost everything because of you. His face fell, and for the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes. I didn't know, he said quietly. I thought you were okay. I thought you'd follow me. I wanted to scream, to tell him I was just a kid, that I wasn't as brave as he was. But I didn't. I just looked out the window, the city lights blurring through my tears. The fight didn't end that night. It lingered, a quiet tension that seeped into our mornings, our dinners, our bed. Ethan tried to make it right, cook my favorite meals, leave notes on the fridge, hold me a little tighter. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't understand me. Not really. He saw our love as a victory, a fairy tale. I saw it as a battlefield, littered with the pieces of who I used to be. I started pulling away. I'd stay late at the community center, lose myself in my students' drawings, anything to avoid the weight of home. Ethan noticed, but he didn't push. He'd always been good at giving me space, even when it hurt him. That was the thing about Ethan he loved fiercely, but he didn't always see the damage he left behind. One evening, I found an old sketchbook in a box we hadn't unpacked since moving in together. It was from Greenhaven, filled with drawings of Ethan, his eyes, his hands, the way he looked when he laughed. Tucked between the pages was a note in his handwriting. You're braver than you think. Jamie. Don't forget it. I sat on the floor, the note in my hand, and cried for the boy I'd been, the one who'd believed in Ethan's promises. When I showed Ethan the note, he sat beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. I meant it, he said softly. You were always stronger than me. I wanted to help you see it. Then why didn't you stay? I asked, my voice breaking. Why did you let me face it alone? He looked away, his jaw tight. I was scared. Okay. After the fight, they sent me away. I didn't have a choice. And when I got out, I thought you'd moved on. I thought you were better off without me. I wanted to believe him, but the hurt was too deep. We sat in silence, the sketchbook between us, a reminder of everything we'd lost and everything we'd found. I didn't know how to bridge the gap, but I knew I still loved him. That was the hardest part, loving someone who'd broken you, who thought they'd saved you, who might never understand the difference. The next few months were a tightrope walk. Ethan and I tried to rebuild, to talk through the pain, but every conversation felt like picking at a scab. He'd apologize, his eyes earnest, but his words always circled back to the same refrain. I thought I was helping you. I wanted to forgive him, to let go of the past, but the weight of Greenhaven clung to me like damp clothes after a storm. We started couples therapy, a suggestion from our friend Marcus, who'd seen too many relationships crumble under unspoken truths. Our therapist, Dr. Lena, was a no-nonsense woman with a knack for cutting through bullshit. You're both carrying stories about each other, she said in our first session. But are they the same story? Ethan told his version, the brave kid who'd pulled me out of my shell, who'd shown me a world where I could be myself. I told mine, the boy who'd lit a match and walked away, leaving me to burn. Dr. Lena listened, her pen scratching notes, and then asked, what do you want from each other now? I didn't have an answer. I wanted Ethan to understand, to see the years I'd spent piecing myself back together. But I also wanted him to stay the man I loved, the one who made me laugh, who danced with me in our kitchen, who still looked at me like I was his whole world. Ethan, for his part, said he wanted us to be happy, to move forward. But I could see the fear in his eyes, the fear that maybe he couldn't fix this. Outside therapy, Life kept moving. Ethan got a big project at work, designing a campaign for a queer-owned business, and he threw himself into it. I was proud of him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding behind his work, just like I was hiding behind mine. I spent more time at the community center, teaching kids how to turn their pain into art. One of my students, a shy 15-year-old named Riley, reminded me of myself, quiet, guarded, afraid to be seen. When he came out to me one afternoon, his voice barely a whisper, I felt a pang of recognition. "You're not alone," I told him, my hand on his shoulder. "It gets better, I promise." But as I said it, I wondered if I believed it. Was my life better, or was I just better at pretending? One night, Ethan came home late, his tie loosened, his eyes tired but bright. "I got a promotion," he said, pulling me into a hug. "They want me to lead the creative team." I congratulated him, but my smile felt hollow. His success was another reminder of how different our paths had been. He'd thrived after Greenhaven, while I'd spent years learning to breathe again. We celebrated with takeout and wine, but the conversation turned heavy. "You're not happy," Ethan said, his voice soft but direct. "I can feel it. Jamie, what's wrong?" I wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I told him about Riley, about the kids at the center, about how helping them felt like helping the boy I used to be. "I'm trying to make it right," I said. "But sometimes I look at you, and I see everything I lost." Ethan's face crumpled. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I thought I was giving you a way out." "You did," I admitted. "But you also broke me, and I don't know how to let that go." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't know how to love him without hurting. The next week, I got a call from my mom. It was the first time we'd spoken in years, and her voice was tentative, like she was testing the waters. "Your dad's sick," she said. "Lung cancer. He's asking for you." I hadn't been back to Greenhaven since I left. The thought of returning made my stomach churn, but I couldn't say no. Not when my dad was dying. Ethan offered to come with me, but I shook my head. "I need to do this alone," I said, and for once, he didn't argue. The drive to Greenhaven was a blur of highways and memories. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked smaller, faded, like a photograph left in the sun. My mom hugged me, her arms frail, and my dad was in a recliner, an oxygen tank at his side. He looked at me, his eyes wet, and said, "I'm sorry, Jamie, for everything." I didn't know how to respond. I'd spent years hating him, hating the town, hating the way they'd turned their backs on me. But sitting there, watching him struggle to breathe, I felt the anger slip away. "I'm sorry too," I said, and we both cried. When I got back to Chicago, Ethan was waiting for me, his eyes searching my face. "How was it?" he asked. "Hard," I said, "but necessary." He nodded, and for the first time in months, I felt like he saw men at the boy he'd saved, but the man I'd become. We didn't talk about Greenhaven that night, or about the fight, or about the shadow between us. Instead, we held each other, the silence heavy but not empty. My dad's death came quietly, a month after my visit to Greenhaven. My mom called me in the middle of the night, her voice steady but hollow. "He's gone, Jamie," she said, and I felt the world shift under me. I hadn't forgiven him. Not fully, but I'd wanted more time to understand, to heal, to find the words we'd never said. Now, that chance was gone. Ethan held me as I cried, his arms strong and familiar. "I'm here," he whispered, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. But even his warmth couldn't fill the void my dad left behind. were the questions that lingered about who I was and what I carried from that small, unforgiving town. I went back to Greenhaven for the funeral. This time, Ethan came with me. He didn't push, didn't try to make it about him. He just stood by my side, his hand in mine, as we faced the stares of people who'd once called me a disgrace. My mom hugged us both, her eyes red but kind. "You've built something good," she said, looking at Ethan. "I'm proud of you, Jamie." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so long running from Greenhaven, from the shame and the silence, that I hadn't realized I was still waiting for her approval. Ethan squeezed my hand, and I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could move forward. But Greenhaven had a way of pulling you back. At the wake, I ran into one of the guys from that night at the party, now older, heavier, with a wedding ring on his finger. He didn't recognize me at first, but when he did, his face hardened. "You and that kid," he said, his voice low. "You caused a lot of trouble back then." I wanted to lash out, to tell him he was the one who'd thrown punches, who'd made my life hell. But Ethan stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "That was a long time ago," he said. "We're not those kids anymore." The guy walked away, but the encounter left me shaken. That night, in the motel, I couldn't sleep. Ethan lay beside me, his breathing steady, but I kept seeing the past his bloodied face. My dad's anger, the town that had tried to erase us. "Do you ever think about what we lost?" I asked into the dark. Ethan turned to me, his eyes catching the moonlight. "All the time," he said. "But I think about what we gained, too. You, me. This life fight's worth it, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I wanted it to be worth it, but I wasn't sure. Back in Chicago, therapy became our lifeline. Dr. Lena pushed us to dig deeper, to confront the stories we'd told ourselves. "Ethan, you see yourself as Jamie's savior," she said one session. "But what if he didn't need saving? What if he needed you to stay?" Ethan flinched, his hands twisting in his lap. "I didn't know how to stay," he admitted. "I was a kid, running from my own shit. I thought if I could get him out, he'd be okay." "And you, Jamie," Dr. Lena said, turning to me. "What are you holding on to?" I took a deep breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I'm holding on to the boy I was. The one who trusted Ethan, who thought love could fix everything. I'm scared that if I let him go, I'll lose myself." Dr. Lena nodded, her eyes kind but unflinching. "You're not that boy anymore. But you're still carrying his pain. What would it look like to let it go?" I didn't have an answer, but the question haunted me. I started sketching again, not Ethan this time, but my self-portraits of the man I was becoming, the man I wanted to be. Each stroke felt like a step toward something new, something whole. One evening, Ethan came home with a surprise, 2 tickets to New York. "Let's get away," he said, his smile tentative. "Just you and me. No past. No Greenhaven. A fresh start." I hesitated. A trip wouldn't erase the hurt, wouldn't change the fact that we saw our stories so differently. But when I looked at him, I saw the boy who'd kissed me under the stars, the man who'd stood by me at my dad's funeral, the partner who was trying, every day, to be better. "Okay," I said. "Let's go." New York was a whirlwind, bright lights, crowded streets, a city that didn't care who you loved. We walked hand in hand through Central Park, ate pizza in Brooklyn, danced in a club where no one knew our names. For the first time in years, I felt light, like the shadow between us was fading. But on our last night, as we sat on a rooftop bar overlooking the city, Ethan said something that brought it all back. "We did it, didn't we?" he said, his voice soft. "We made it out. We're free. I looked at him, his face glowing in the neon light, and I realized he'd never understand. Freedom wasn't just leaving Greenhaven. It was letting go of the boy who'd been broken there and the man who still thought he'd fixed him. New York was supposed to be our reset, but it only sharpened the edges of our divide. Ethan came back energized, his head full of plans, new projects, new adventures, a life he saw as proof of our triumph. I came back quieter, my sketches darker, my heart heavier. The city had shown me what we could be, but it also showed me what we weren't, a couple who understood each other's scars. Back in Chicago, the tension grew. Ethan threw himself into his new role at work, staying late, coming home with stories of clients and deadlines. I buried myself in the community center, spending hours with Riley and the other kids, helping them navigate their fears. It was easier to fix their pain than my own. But every night, when I came home to Ethan's hopeful smile, I felt the gap between us widen. One evening, it all came crashing down. Ethan had cooked dinner pasta with homemade sauce, candles on the table, a playlist of our favorite songs. He was trying. I knew that, but I couldn't match his effort. I picked at my food, my mind stuck on a conversation with Riley earlier that day. He'd asked me how I'd found the courage to come out, and I'd lied, saying it was love that made me brave. The truth was, it was survival. "You're not here," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the music. "You're sitting right in front of me, but you're not here." I looked up, his eyes searching mine. "I'm trying, Ethan," I said, but it sounded weak, even to me. "Trying." He snapped, his fork clattering against the plate. "I'm doing everything I can, Jamie. I'm fighting for us. What are you doing?" The words hit like a punch. I stood, my chair scraping the floor. "I'm trying to figure out who I am," I said, my voice shaking. "Because for years, I was just the kid you saved. The kid who followed you. But I'm not that kid anymore, and I don't know how to be with you without losing myself again." Ethan's face crumpled, but there was anger there too. "You think I don't know loss? I lost my family, my home, everything. But I kept going. For us. And now you're telling me it wasn't enough." "It wasn't enough," I shouted, the words tearing out of me. "You left me, Ethan. You got to walk away. Start over. I was the one who stayed, who dealt with the fallout. You don't get to decide what that cost me." He stood, his hands gripping the table. "I didn't walk away. They took me. And when I came back, I found you. I married you. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means everything," I said, my voice breaking. "And it means nothing. Because you still think you saved me, and I'm still trying to save myself." We stared at each other, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. Then I grabbed my coat and walked out, the door slamming behind me. I wandered Chicago's streets for hours, the cold biting at my skin. I ended up at the community center, sitting in the dark art room, surrounded by half-finished canvases. I thought about Riley, about the kids who looked to me for hope. I thought about my dad, his apology too late to heal us. And I thought about Ethan, the boy who'd set my world on fire and the man who was still trying to keep it burning. When I got home, Ethan was on the couch, his eyes red. "I don't know how to fix this," he said, his voice raw. "Tell me what to do, Jamie. Please." I sat beside him, my hands in my lap. "I don't know either," I admitted. "But I know I love you. And I know I'm tired of carrying the past." He reached for my hand, and this time, I let him take it. We didn't talk after that, just sat there, holding on to each other like we were afraid to let go. The next few weeks were fragile. We moved carefully, like we were navigating a minefield. Therapy helped, but it was slow. Painful work. Dr. Lena pushed us to be honest, to stop hiding behind our versions of the story. You're both survivors, she said, but you're surviving different wars. You need to see each other's battles. Ethan started opening up about his own pain, his mom's rejection, the years in foster care, the fear that he'd never be enough. I told him about the nights I'd spent hating myself, the years I'd spent rebuilding. We cried. We fought. We laughed. And slowly, we started to see each other not as savior and saved, but as two people who'd been broken and were trying to heal. One night, Ethan pulled out an old photo from Green Havana, blurry shot of us at the quarry, laughing, our faces young and unguarded. This is who we were, he said, his voice soft. But it's not who we are now. I don't want to lose you, Jamie. Not again. I looked at the photo, at the boys we'd been, and I felt something shift. The past wasn't gone, but it didn't have to define us. I don't want to lose you either, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The photo from the quarry became a touchstone, a reminder of the boys we'd been and the men we were becoming. Ethan taped it to our fridge, next to a sketch I'd drawn of us now older, wiser, our hands intertwined. We were trying, not just to fix what was broken, but to build something new. It wasn't easy. Some days, the shadow of Greenhaven loomed large, and I'd catch myself retreating, guarding my heart. But Ethan was patient, and I was learning to be brave again. We started small. Date nights at the diner where we'd reconnected. Long walks along Lake Michigan, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan told me about his dreams starting his own design firm, maybe adopting a kid someday. I told him about mine opening an art studio, helping more kids like Riley find their voice. For the first time, we were dreaming together, not just for ourselves. One afternoon, I got a call from Riley's mom. He'd been caught skipping school, and she was worried. He looks up to you, Jamie, she said. Can you talk to him? I agreed, and when I met Riley at the community center, he was slumped in a chair, his hoodie pulled low over his eyes. What's going on, kid? I asked, sitting across from him. He shrugged, but his voice was tight. I told my best friend I'm gay. He hasn't talked to me since. I felt a pang, remembering my own losses. That hurts, I said. But you're not alone. You've got people who care about you, your mom, me, the folks here. And you've got you. That's the most important part. Riley looked at me, his eyes searching. How do you do it? How do you keep going when people hate you for who you are? I took a deep breath, thinking of Ethan, of Greenhaven, of the years I'd spent running from myself. You find people who love you for it, I said, and you learn to love yourself. It takes time, but it's worth it. That night, I told Ethan about Riley, about how helping him felt like healing myself. You're good at this, Ethan said, his voice warm. You're giving those kids what we didn't have. And what's that? I asked, leaning into him. Hope, he said simply, and I felt the shadow lift. Just a little. We decided to renew our vows. Not because we needed to, but because we wanted Toe a chance to recommit. Not to the boys we'd been, but to the men we were now. We planned a small ceremony in the same park where we'd married, with our friends and my mom there to witness it. Riley came too, his smile shy but bright, and I felt a swell of pride for him, for us. As we stood under the oak trees, Ethan took my hands, his eyes steady. I don't know if I saved you, Jamie, he said, his voice breaking. But you saved me. Every day, you save me. I choked back tears. My vow simpler, but no less true. I love you, Ethan. Not because you fixed me, but because you're here, fighting with me. When we kissed, the applause was soft, intimate. like a promise kept. My mom hugged us both, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But life doesn't stop for happy moments. A week after the vow renewal, Ethan got an offer to lead a project in San Francisco, a dream job. But it meant leaving Chicago. We talked it over for days, weighing the pros and cons. It was a chance for him to grow, to build the life he'd always wanted. But it meant uprooting ours, leaving the community center, my kids, the home we'd fought so hard to create. "I'll stay if you want me to," Ethan said one night, his voice quiet. "I don't want to lose you again." I looked at him, at the man who'd broken me and loved me, who'd pushed me to be brave and forced me to face my pain. I thought of Riley, of the kids who'd come after him, of the life we could build anywhere as long as we were together. "Let's go," I said. "Let's do it together." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "You sure?" "I'm sure," I said, and I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't following Ethan. I was choosing him. As we packed up our apartment, I found the old sketchbook again, the one with Ethan's note, "You're braver than you think." I showed it to him, and he laughed, pulling me close. "You don't need that anymore," he said. "You're already brave." I kept the sketchbook anyway, not as a reminder of the past, but as a map of how far we'd come. San Francisco was a shock of color and chaos, a city that pulsed with life. Our new apartment was smaller, perched on a hill with a view of the bay, and Jasper, our dog, claimed the sunny spot by the window. Ethan threw himself into his new job, his excitement infectious, and I found a community center in the Mission District, where I started teaching art again. The kids here were different, bolder, louder, but they carried the same fears, the same hopes. I thought of Riley often, wondering how he was doing, hoping he'd found his way. Moving didn't erase the past, but it gave us space to redefine it. Ethan and I were learning to listen, to see each other's truths. He stopped calling himself my savior, and I stopped seeing him as the boy who'd broken me. We were just Jamie and Ethan, two men who'd fought through hell and come out stronger, together. One Saturday, we took a drive to the coast, the ocean stretching endless before us. We walked along the cliffs, the wind tugging at our clothes, and Ethan took my hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, his voice almost lost in the waves. "Us, I mean." I thought about Greenhaven, about the night that had torn us apart, about the years of pain and rebuilding. I thought about the man beside me, flawed and fierce, who'd loved me through it all. "No," I said, squeezing his hand. "I don't regret you." He smiled, his eyes bright with something like relief. "Good. Because I'd do it all again, Jamie. Even the hard parts. For you." I laughed, the sound startlingly free. "Even the part where you thought you saved me." He grinned, pulling me close. "Maybe not that part. But the rest. Hell yeah." We stood there, the ocean roaring below, and I felt the weight of the past lifting. Not gone, but lighter, like a scar that no longer ached. I wasn't the boy who'd been broken in Greenhaven, and Ethan wasn't the boy who'd thought he could fix me. We were something new, something we'd built together, brick by brick, fight by fight, love by love. Months later, I got a letter from Riley. He was doing better. He wrote, thanks to me. He joined an art club, come out to his mom, and was planning to apply to college. "You showed me I could be myself," he wrote, and I cried, not out of sadness, but out of pride. I showed the letter to Ethan, and he hugged me, his voice thick. "You're saving people too, Jamie. Don't forget that." I didn't. I started an art program for queer youth, a safe space where they could create, share, and heal. Ethan helped design the flyers, his talent turning my vision into something vibrant and real. We worked side by side, partners in every sense, and I realized that this was what love could be, not a fire that consumed you, but a light that guided you home. Years later, on our 10th anniversary, we went back to Greenhaven. Not to stay, but to close the circle. The town hadn't changed much, the same dusty streets, the same judgmental stares. But we weren't the same. We walked through the quarry, hand in hand, and I sketched the rocks where we'd once lain, dreaming of a different life. Ethan watched me, his smile soft, and said, "You're still the best thing I ever found. And you're still the boy who turned my world upside down," I said, laughing. But I wouldn't change it. We left Greenhaven that day, not as boys running from a town that didn't want them, but as men who'd built a life that did. Ethan still thought he'd saved me, sometimes, in his quiet moments, and I let him. Because maybe, in his own way, he had, not by pulling me out of Greenhaven, but by loving me through it, by staying when it mattered most. Our story wasn't perfect. It was messy, painful, full of mistakes and regrets. But it was ours, and it was enough. As we drove away, the sun setting behind us, I looked at Ethan, his hand on mine, and I knew we'd ruined each other, and we'd saved each other. And somehow, that was exactly what love was supposed to be.